Hello and welcome to what is not only the first video in 2 months but also the first video on this channel with commentary. I'm bricksathome. Hello, welcome. So this is a time lapse that I filmed a couple of weeks ago now. This is me building a rest area or service station just on the eastern side of the A1 near Leeming Bar. So we pick up the action. I've done a bit of work already, as you can probably see, just around sort of the entrance of the place, and I'm now building a small hill near the entrance. I presume it's a man-made hill in real life, just with leftover dirt, but this is just filling in some of this area, and it's at this point where I then realise that everything's a bit too low down, it's a bit too far south, because there wouldn't be enough space for the truck stop. So it's now I have to select everything, move it all up, make sure that nothing has been destroyed by that action, which turns out it had. I just needed to fix up a few areas like these paths here, that path, and just do some minor tweaks, just make sure that all works, and now that means that there's enough space for the truck's parking area. But first I'm now just sort of shifting these buildings around just to make them fit a bit better with how I want to lay this out. And then I'm using some asphalt textures. This is just the same as the normal texture, slightly different actually. And I'm using some dark coloured brushes just to do some lines, which then becomes a nice zebra crossing, which will obviously allow people that have parked in the truck stop to go to the petrol station shop and get some supplies. Now here I'm creating a bit of a, it's sort of like a green area, it's a bit like a park with some paths going through it. This is just between the main petrol station area and the truck parking area. This creates sort of the entrance to it. So we're just filling that in with grass, just to make everything look nice. We've got a nice path going through there. I'm using things, they're called bezier patches. I pronounced their name incorrectly. Much to some people's dismay. I call them bezier patches, which is wrong. But they're basically the easiest way of filling a hole in like that. So it gives you sort of like a 3x3 mesh that you can then manipulate however you want. This is an animated gate, so the player will drive up to it and it will open. In real life this truck parking area is paid, you have to pay there to stay the night. But obviously that's not going to be represented in game, because that would require creating, I guess it would sort of work like a toll. It wouldn't really be smooth in game. And now I'm just laying out the boundaries of the truck area, and it's at this point when I didn't have a very good picture of what the layout of the truck area was actually like, because the satellite view on Google Maps isn't updated yet. So at this point I was just sort of making up what I thought was there. However, later I found an actual picture of Google Images of the truck park itself, and that obviously then allowed me to produce it in a much better and more accurate way. So now I'm just trying to figure out how I want to do the parking. Annoyingly, one of the assets we don't have is a long sort of singular lined truck parking spaces. You can see I've laid out ones that are only the length of a car, and this is because I'm then going to have to go back and make these all separately. I'm doing it now. I have to individually place every line. So I make a few, copy a few over, then slowly copy them over and over and over and over, and that allows me to make some actual truck parking spaces, because the ones in game aren't particularly realistic for places like the UK. So you can see, it all requires a little bit of tweaking where the copy pasting didn't quite work properly. However, that creates what I thought looked quite good as a truck park. As you can see, I'm extending it there because I realised it was a bit too small, and I wanted a second sort of row. I think by this point I had by this point I've looked up an image of the thing itself, so now I can actually make it a bit more realistic. However, you'll see later that I actually get rid of that middle bit as well, so I realise that that's wrong. And now we just place some trucks randomly throughout the car park just to make it look a little bit more filled. And it's now that I realise that the sort of the curb areas are actually made of grass, so I go back and have to change all of those. I do them individually for some reason, but whatever. Just change those to be the grass texture rather than concrete. And now I realise that the shape is incorrect again, so I go back and I tweak the design again just to make the layout of it the same as real life, which requires this sort of diagonal section and also some extra parking spaces along in the other direction, and also me getting rid of that centre section because that's not there. So now that we've got the parking spaces all in the right places, so they actually represent what's there in real life, it's time to do the borders of the truck parking area. And this is a slightly weird design in real life. It requires quite a bit of intricate curb placing. You can see I've got a little bit of terrain there attached to a curb that I'm then copying and pasting to create the shape that I want. This then allows me just to fill in the gaps with the visa patches that I mentioned earlier. And there's a little section that's closed off in real life that had a slightly different asphalt texture, I guess not used very often, so I was representing that then with a different shade of asphalt, and later I'll put some bollards there to stop people from driving in it, which are there in real life. But first I'm filling in this grass area, filling in all the gaps of grass, and I believe I put some bushes on those. The game allows you to randomly place bushes on a section of terrain, which makes things a lot easier. And here I'm using some double-sided terrain just to create some randomish looking hills. And taking a look around, you may notice now that there's more than there was before, and that's because I randomly, accidentally, stopped my recording while laying out some more of these curbs. So we're now filling those in. These obviously weren't there before, but they are now. They've magically materialised after I got quite annoyed that the recording had stopped without me knowing. And now adding some cars into some parking areas, doing a little bit more of these sort of random hills with the terrain, filling in the last bit of grass. And then putting a fence around the border of the whole rest area itself. and some few extra trucks that are also there in Google Street View. And at this point the terrain around the rest area itself is pretty much complete. You'll see me flying around sort of looking for places where there might be gaps or flickering terrain, but all in all that's pretty much done now, and now I'm just adding some final sort of dirt markings to the areas to break up the repetitive asphalt texture that would be there otherwise. So I'm doing this with some tyres, some sort of tyre track texture things, and also a model that just represents some sort of like dirt splatters on the pavement, which you should see quite a lot around the Eurotruck world. It's used pretty commonly. And there we go, there is all of the work we're going to be doing on the gas station today. We now move on to Microsoft PowerPoint, which is probably not a program you were expecting to see today, but nonetheless, here's Microsoft PowerPoint. We're going to create some signs, because what good is a rest area without any signs telling you what there is? You might not expect PowerPoint to be a particularly useful tool in this, but I stand by the fact that PowerPoint is one of the most diverse programs. You can use it for pretty much everything. I've used it to create videos before, I've used it to make animations. It's a very useful tool if used in the correct way, and here I'm using it to make a sign. Obviously it's not brilliant for all things. Image manipulation itself is pretty terrible on PowerPoint, so later you should see me switch over to using GIMP, which is like a free version of Photoshop. And now that I've got the sign pretty much laid out, I'm going to start filling those little boxes with the correct icons. Some of those obviously aren't possible in PowerPoint unless I found them on the internet, so I'm just filling in the easy ones, the ones with text and the ones with basic shapes. So we've got the WC, we've got ATM, we're going to have 24 hours, and that'll be pretty much all I can fit on there without having to make some custom images on GIMP. And then the last thing that I can do on PowerPoint, I'm grabbing an image off the internet. I tried Costa Coffee, realise it's not a very good image, so we're doing Subway, there we go. This is probably the only image manipulation you can do on PowerPoint, and that is removing the border from an image. As you can see, it takes me way longer than it should do to do this. I should really have done that bit on GIMP, but whatever. There we go, Subway's now in. And that's all we can do on PowerPoint. So we move over to GIMP, where we finish with the icons themselves. Now the shape of the canvas I've got in GIMP is it's a very specific size, and that's because it's the size of the model that this image is going to go on later. We've only got one size of the model at the moment. Obviously a square one would be better, but we've just got this rectangle one. Here I'm applying a dirt texture over. I've made a dirt texture in the past previously that I can just put on any of the signs that I make. So I'm just applying that, and then I'm hiding it so I can actually make the images themselves. So bring the image back up for reference, and we're going to make a fuel pump icon. And this is basically just pixel art at this point. Next up is the knife and fork symbol, which I assume represents a restaurant. I spend a bit too long making a circle, and then I try and make a fork icon. That ends up looking pretty terrible, so we go back and tweak that later. There's the knife. and then I realised how terrible the fork looks, so we go back, and there we go, there's the fork. And a shopping basket, again pretty simple, that's just a symmetrical shape basically, so again pixel art, just creating the same thing on both sides, handle, and then just some crosses in the middle, and then some tweaks where it wasn't quite symmetrical. Now the bed, this was probably the most confusing one to do because that's a pretty horrible image to recreate. So for this one I ignore what's on the real life sign and I just sort of freehand it. I try to draw a 3D bed. This actually works a lot better than I expected it would. You can actually sort of tell it's a bed, which is much better than I expected when I started drawing it. You'll see I try to do pillows, give up the pillows, and then just make the headboard red. And then there's the bed. And then finally we draw on to what is surprisingly the most difficult one to draw. This is a shower. I spent way too long trying to figure out a pattern for the water. This took me much longer than it should have done. You can see I go back a bit, at least 3 times to try and draw this water before finally settling on one I like. On this one I start to go symmetrical and I just press randomly. And then that's too much water, so I remove some of it, and then that's what I decided to finish with. And finally, the last part of this sign is the Costa Express logo. Now these are obviously in the wrong colours, the text wants to be white, so we start by getting rid of the background and turning it into a different colour. Any colour other than white basically, and then we select the text, and then we make that text white. And then after that we can select all the background again and remove it. And then after some final tweaks we can scale it down and put it in place, and it's more readable than I ever expected it to be. And there is the sign pretty much complete. We just reapply the dirt and then get rid of the dirt wherever we don't want it, where the sign should be a bit clearer. And there we go. There is one of the signs that is going to be present in the gas station. So with that said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. First video in 2 months, I apologise for that. I've been quite busy and also there hasn't been much going on in the Euro Truck and American Truck world. So yes, thank you very much everybody, and I will see you in the next video.